So Bob, before we go into episode 2, do you want to tell us a bit about how you made the movie, the difficulties of maybe that you came upon and so on?
Well, of course, you start out trying to find funding, and when you don't do it and you say, just going to do this, then there's all kinds of problems. There's location problems, there's cash problems, there's technical problems. I was very fortunate with the Ottawa film groups that there were a lot of contacts, and I only ended up working directly with a gentleman who is one of the foremost cinematographers in the city, and also had written and directed his own feature film very recently, and it was very well done. His name's Ben Hoskin, and his experience was invaluable as I was going forward. So that was one big element that it took a huge load off my back. And also because of my experience in university with doing lighting and my experience with photography, I could talk the same language. So that helped to establish a dialogue between us that worked really well. And it was interesting, one actor said at one point, he was somewhat skeptical of taking this part in my production, and he was nervous right up until the day he came on set. And he said later, he said, I watched you and Ben interacting, and I said, this is going to be okay. So Ben was a godsend. I had one of the best sound guys in town, Laszlo, and Ben took care of most of the rest of the crew. He had people he was used to working with who could handle lighting, the gaffers, and so on. And so he would set most of that stuff up. And so I just had to show up and run the cast through their thing. And hey, it all worked very well.
That's great. And speaking of cast, do you want to tell us about your cast?
Well, we had some really wonderful cast, and that also was an interesting thing in many ways. I started out talking to people locally, but I also found a chap who had done film and he was actually working on a film at the time, and I actually hired him as a consultant, and he helped me with my first casting, and I met a couple of people through him, most precisely this beautiful gal right here, who is from the big metropolis of Stittsville, fabulous actress, and also a number of people that subsequently became, they were smaller players, smaller parts, but that was a start. Then the big thing was this guy right here. He's an actor in Toronto. He mainly does comedy.
Okay.
And he really wanted the part of the hero, but he was flexible, and he offered, he and his brother have a film company in Toronto, and he offered to help me with casting in Toronto.
Oh, that's great.
So I went down there, and between he and I, we decided who we wanted to bring in. He'd introduced some people to me, but mostly we had done, the tools on the web now are so great. So I'd actually put a notice out on the web, and people responded to that. Said, yeah, I'm interested in this part, here's your blah, blah, blah. So I went down there, and lo and behold, we had some fabulous people come in. One of them being Kristen McCullough, who plays Jill. This little character over here who plays Carla. She walked in to the casting call, and she aced that part so well. Like, she was Carla. There was no question in my mind. I wouldn't have had to ever look at any other actress, because she just nailed it. She was fresh out of film school, 20 20 years old, 21 years old or something like that, and playing a 16 or 17-year-old. But she was wonderful, and so that, and Dylan, an interesting guy, former football player. He's not big, he's not tall, but he's solid. And boy, did we need those skills, because I don't know if you remember in episode 1, him running down those stairs. Now, you know, in the film business, you don't do one take.
No.
So he ran those stairs, and it was 9 stories of stairs. Or 6 stories of stairs. But he ran those stairs multiple times. So we really worked him out. We had other interesting issues with cast, like so Brandon, who had set up this for me, I cast him as a villain. And I said, no, you're perfect for the villain. And did he turn in a performance as a villain? Yeah, I would say he made a real good villain, a really good actor. But I was afraid at one point he was going to turn blue, because we were shooting in what was supposed to be the Caribbean. He's got a bathing suit on and a little robe over him, and we're shooting it north of Sorel, Quebec in October.
Oh, goodness.
On Lac Saint-Pierre. So yeah.
It must have been chilly, to say the least.
I sort of thought he might, we might have to color correct for blue, but as it turned out, it came out pretty good.
He was a trooper. That's good. And speaking of filming locations, how did you find your filming locations?
Again, a combination of serendipity and knowing people. One of the big advantages was, having been in the multimedia business in Canada, I'd worked with a lot of the high-tech companies, and in fact, our first projects were for one of Terry Matthews' companies. And in e-learning, I actually came to Ottawa to build training for Terry Matthews' company, Sir Terry Matthews. And his Canada Research Park includes dozens and dozens of high-tech buildings, and they gave me permission to shoot in vacant offices, hallways, and just to put that in context, there's one scene later in the film where Burry is running through an airport.
Right.
Or sorry, IRUB's running through an airport. The IRUB-Burry thing may be confusing to people, but if you look at it once, they're spelled the same, they're just inverted letters.
Oh.
There's a reason for that, which shows up later. You can watch for that. Anyway, he was going through this airport, and I wanted to film it locally, and so I went to YOW, and I said, I have this 30-second piece I need to film, and oh yeah, we can do that, et cetera, et cetera. When the dust settled, that location, for what would have been 30 seconds of finished footage, would have cost me about $5,000. Big film companies that come here from the US and film in Ottawa, they're used to paying that, right?
Right.
But I filmed it in a bridge between 2 buildings over top of the highway at 555 Legate, which is one of the Canada Research properties, and it cost me nothing.
That's amazing. That's
So,
lucky.
Yeah.
That's really lucky.
So yeah, in total, in episode 1, there were quite a few scenes that were shot in those buildings. When Rand first enters, the first time you see Rand, he's coming in from his airplane, shot in 555 Legate. Jill and Rand, as in their first love scene, shot in the floor of an office in 555 Legate. Rand's office, 555 Legate.
Right.
Jill's office, 80 Hines Road, another KRP property. So just all kinds of things like that. But that was just some of it. you know, having friends in the dance community. You know we do ballroom dance, and having friends in the dance community. We shot in 2 different houses, which were owned by friends of mine. One in just west of Canada, and one in Westport.
Okay.
And so those kind of things were nice. My daughter was in ski patrol, or had been in ski patrol, and she made connections through that. So I'm trying to figure out how to get an airplane.
So again, we're going back to networking, right? The more you network, the more...
All about networking.
Yeah.
So we ended up shooting in Gananoque.
Okay.
There's a skydiving company there. So we shot in Gananoque, we shot inside their aircraft. I had great support from the city. I greased the wheels a little bit through my counselor, who was then Marianne Wilkinson, and I talked with the Ottawa Film Office, and we got permission to shoot on OC Transpo. OC Transpo was fabulous because I needed shots of what was supposed to be the New York subway and grand escapes on a train at one point, etc. All of that stuff we shot at the subway stations and actually on the train. And then later on, and you'll see this toward the end, we shot in one of the parks here in the city. Supposedly, it's on a Caribbean island.
Hey, if it works, right?
You know, that's the fascinating thing about film. The fact that you can, one of the funniest ones is, there's a spot in the film, and I would defy anyone to detect this, but there's a spot in the film where there's an outside shot of a house, and they go through a door, and the inside happens to be about 100 miles away. But you don't know that.
No, of course not. But that's the...
It's part of the wonder of film.
The magic, I was going to say.
The things that you can do, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So Bob, right before we go into episode 2, tell me about what maybe sticks out, or is there anything we should look for?
Well, look for Rand to make some tough decisions. You know, he's lost his love. He's got... Those are serious problems in the corporation. What's he going to do about that? How can he react? What power does he have? What can he do? So watch for his reaction to those driving forces in episode 2. We also do another flashback in Irup's life to his brewery relationship with his younger sister, his half-sister. And it's important it's half-sister because it affects the incest situation. So that's something to watch for. Keeping track of it. It's difficult in a film when you're switching between time frames. And in fact, it was difficult for the actor because the actor's going from being in his early 20s to suddenly being 35 and back again. So those switches. So keeping track of that, watching for that, being aware of when that happens, and then watching, as I said before, that the psychological impact of what goes on Burry's psyche and how that shapes the person he becomes later.
Perfect. Well, enjoy episode 2.